Alright, today is 9.3. So like I said, we are going pretty quickly through this chapter, especially since we're going to skip the last two sections. This is our second to last. So it's angle relationships. So we're going to talk about three different types of angles today. The first one is going to be vertical angles, which you see the definition there. Vertical angles are two opposite angles formed by two intersecting lines. So notice here we have two lines that are intersecting one another. So these are vertical angles together. These ones are also vertical angles. So there's really two sets for every set of lines that intersect. We have one here and one here. Notice they kind of form that X mark, so they're in between the lines here and here. They're vertical from one another. Now these ones are horizontal, but if you were to tilt it, they'd still be vertical. They're across from each other, they're opposite. The important thing to recognize, vertical angles have the same measure. So these two are the same, and these two are the same. What do we call angles that have the same measure? They're called congruent angles. So congruent is a word that you'll need to know for geometry one day. Congruent just means the same or equal. So we're saying there are two or more angles that have the same measurement. So let's take a look over here. They just want us to practice using vertical angles. So if I have 140 here and X is here, what do we know about these two? They're vertical angles, because notice they're across from one another, formed by lines. So what's X equal to? X is going to be equal to 140. It's the same as its vertical angle counterpart. Same thing down here. What happens here? Even though they're the ones going this direction, what do we know about X and 95? They're vertical angles. They form that X. And so we're looking here, what's the angle measurement? They're both going to be 95 degrees. So vertical angles are as simple as that. They're just the same. So let's take a look at two other types of angles. And maybe you've heard these terms before. I doubt that you have, but these are terms that will come back again. Pretty much in pre-algebra, you'll talk about them again. And then you also talk about them more in depth in geometry. So we're going to introduce you to them now, just so you are familiar with them. And then we're going to take a look at them in more detail later on down the road. So the first one, the first set, are complementary angles. And they are two angles whose measure add to 90 degrees. So if two angles add up to be 90 degrees, they're complementary angles. So if I were to say, so together they should form a right angle. So these would be two complementary angles. So if I tell you these are 37 and this is 53, together when I add those, I get 90 degrees. So these two are complementary angles. And if you notice in the word complement, if I write this a little bigger, so if you look at the word complement, if I were to draw a little line here, notice that forms what looks like a 9 with the 0 after it. That's 90. That helps you remember that complementary angles are 90 degrees. What's the other set of angles we're looking at? They're called supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are angles whose measures add to 180 degrees. So if we look at a little picture here, they're going to form a straight line and look like this. So we could have one that's, let's say, 40 degrees, and the other one would have to be 140 degrees. Now, a little trick for supplementary. Let me erase this one, and I'll do supplementary for you now. If you notice, now this one's not as direct, but if I write those first few letters of it, if if I were to complete this, notice it forms an 8, and I can add the 1 0 and make it 180. So that makes one supplementary 180 degrees. So go ahead and make sure you